Now let me introduce today's speakers. First is Amanda Balla, who is Marketing Manager with Bonfire. Joining Amanda is Lili Chen, who is a procurement leader and member and speaker for CPAA. For more information about Amanda and Lili, you can find it by clicking on the speaker bio widget at the bottom of your screen. All right, with that, let's just get started. Amanda, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. And thank you to Lili and to all of you as well for taking the time to be here today. We're really looking forward to a great hour, and we hope that you'll come away with some key takeaways that you can implement for positive outcomes on your procurement team. I also wanted to highlight before we dive in that we will be discussing technology today, specifically eSourcing tools and platforms. And while we at Bonfire are an eSourcing tool, the information shared today is relatable to many of the tools on the market. And there really are a plethora of tools that you can choose from. So what we hope to share today is what we view as an important topic. We think it's important to the market, and we want to explore some of the ideas about how you can improve your day-to-day and minimize risk and negative impacts to your team and your municipality. We hope you'll find this information helpful, and we'll use it to inform your own research when you begin or continue your search for new technology for your team or for an e-sourcing tool. Procurement professionals are instrumental in delivering the goods and services that cities and counties depend on to function. Increasingly, you're gaining recognition as vital contributors to your organization's strategic goals. Although you play such a vital role, procurement departments don't always have the tools and technology that you need to make your role as strategic as possible. Not only can this often make your job more difficult, it also opens your department as well as your municipality to risk. Today, we'll review those risks and possible impacts on both your municipality and your citizens. Today, we'll be exploring how municipal procurement teams can leverage technology, again, specifically e-sourcing tools, to help you adapt to the many curveballs that can be thrown at your department, and how it can help you create the strongest, most resilient procurement process possible. So before we dive in, we wanted to just take a quick look at the agenda. So you'll see we'll be covering a number of topics. We'll be looking at the current state of technology in municipal procurement. Then we'll take a look at what manual processes mean for municipal teams, which a number of you may still be using. Then we'll be looking at how to build a resilient procurement process. We'll do a risks review, and then look at some of the impacts to stakeholders and what those mean to you. So we wanted to take a quick look at the stats that you see up here on the screen. It gives just a brief overview of technology in municipal procurement and what we're seeing in terms of digitization and adaptation. So what we're seeing is 72% of procurement teams spend less than 2% of their annual budget on training. 51% of procurement leaders don't believe that they have the capability on their team to deliver on their current procurement strategy. So that's quite a staggering number when you think that just over half of procurement leaders don't feel that they can fulfill their current procurement strategy. Then we also see that 7% of procurement leaders report substantial digitization of the procurement function. So that really speaks volumes to the fact that it hasn't been much of a priority, and it is something that hasn't really been implemented throughout teams. And then we also see that 60% of procurement teams either have no tools or rely on improvised manual processes for procurement workflows. And again, that's a key point, I think, that's important for all of us to take note of. So Lili, from your perspective, what has your experience been in regards to funding for technology in the procurement space? Do you find it to be a challenge for teams to access budget, or is it that they simply just don't have the time to put together a case for implementing technology?
I think there are some challenges when it comes to receiving funding or investment for technology. I know that in my department, I did not have a budget line for it, and so what was important and what worked for me was building a robust business case for that funding and investment. What your organization will want to know is, what is the return on investment, which you can quantify both through qualitatively and quantitatively. So from qualitative measures, what you're going to present are the return on investment will address some compliance and some risks that are currently facing your processes today. What it will prevent. So for example, if a lot of your processes today are currently manual, it will prevent human error. It will help you enable and enforce compliance to your existing policies and procedures. And it will have some other benefits such as centralization of your documents. And then quantitatively, you're able to also measure your efficiencies and some turnaround times and some throughput as well. What's important as part of your business case, I would say, is to start off with a current state assessment. What are your current pain points? What are you looking to achieve right now that you're some targeted metrics and areas that you're looking to improve? So with the current state and then mapping out what a future state will be, the roadmap to there might be some investment in some systems. And that's sort of the case that you want to present to your organization in order to get some investment and funding.
Great. That's some great insight. And it sounds like you really had some success using that model and really building that business case and presenting that to management in order to implement that technology. Based on what we're hearing in the market, there is an increase in the comfort level and more of an appetite for teams to adopt new technology. We're finding that vendors are now more comfortable, and many are actually expecting to move away from paper submissions, which can be lengthy and sometimes even cost prohibitive to them. And we're also finding that evaluator expectations are shifting. So we're finding that a lot of evaluators are expecting to be able to do things digitally as well as on the vendor side. So before we go any further, we wanted to take a quick poll just to see what type of evaluation system the majority of you joining us today are currently working with. So whether that's an online bidding portal, if you're using a combination of manual and some sort of online processes, if you're still using a completely manual process, or if you've patched together something else yourself. So we'll give you just a very short window of time to answer that question, and then we'll take a look at the results and how they impact today's discussion. All right. So based on the results here, we see that there's 21% of you using an online bidding portal, 39% are using a combination of manual and some form of online, and then an even split with those individuals at 39% who currently aren't using a system and are using manual processes. So I really think that today's discussion will be great to inform you and just give you a little bit of information about how you can maybe add some additional technology into online processes that you're currently using, or introducing some sort of technology into your manual process. Lili, on your end, is this about what you would expect to see from the individuals joining us today?
I'm certainly not surprised at the results. And I do apologize, I hear an echo right now, and we'll try to fix this throughout the webinar. But I'm not surprised at the results. They're aligned with the feedback that I've heard when meeting other procurement professionals at conferences. A lot of people are either still at the beginning and researching phases of looking at what they can invest in. You know, for me, not too long ago, I do recall using Excel spreadsheets and paper-based handouts. What we were able to benefit from this and moving towards a system was elimination of a lot of those sometimes Excel formula errors that you can have, manual human errors and having to copy and paste into an Excel spreadsheet from your paper handouts, and some efficiencies in the time to tabulate and reconcile your results. So I'm not too surprised at the results here, and what I see here is actually a big opportunity.
Definitely, and I think it is positive to see that some of the individuals joining us is starting to move towards the online platform. And even if you're still using some manual processes, I think it's fantastic to start introducing some of that technology. What we're seeing on our end is a lot of companies are beginning by listing projects on their own website. So that's the start in the process, but then most are still falling short and not taking the process a few steps further by starting to require online submissions, and then as an extension of that process, performing the evaluations online. taking a look now at technology in the purchasing process. So we wanted to take a look here at, for those of you using a manual process, you may be facing some of these challenges. So when it comes to posting and receiving, some of the challenges you may be facing are limited vendor reach. Again, sometimes it's actually cost prohibitive for individuals to have to create binders, send them in to you. That can be a deterrent. So you may be missing out on some fantastic vendors that aren't able to participate in a manual process. There's also possibly missed opportunity, again, due to courier error or other submission issues. You'll see later on in the presentation that a number of vendors do leave things often to the last minute, and sometimes they can miss the submission window. It's also time-consuming on your end to receive, timestamp, check, and then distribute those submissions. In terms of evaluation, that has its own set of challenges. So there's the idea of manual data input, which of course carries the risk of error, as well as taking a long time. There can be inconsistencies in documentation, and it can be a really cumbersome process for evaluators if they're taking home paper submissions and binders and trying to go through those. And also the reliance on spreadsheets to compare and analyze supplier data. Lili, I think you mentioned, sometimes there is that element of human error, and it is very simple to create an issue within the RFP just by a simple incorrect keystroke. And then moving through the process to the post-award, there's a number of challenges with this. One simple challenge being storage limitations. If you have a number of paper copies and binders, we know a lot of individuals who are on manual processes may even need an entire storage room to keep track of all these binders and things of that nature. So that's definitely a challenge in and of itself. It's also time consuming to respond to vendor debriefs or records requests. It can also be difficult to find those papers if a vendor request is coming in quite a few months after the award has occurred. And then there's also the risk of files being misplaced, of course. So today we're discussing this idea of a resilient procurement process and how teams can best build resiliency into their process. So we wanted to take a look at what this notion of a resilient process actually looks like. With a laundry list of items and services to procure for your municipality and budgets to abide by that may be shrinking, stakeholders that are likely across many different departments, and citizens to be transparent and accountable to, there's definitely a lot for municipal procurement teams to deal with. So when we speak about a resilient procurement process, we're referring to one that can meet all of these competing needs and can also handle the many unexpected events that often come up. Technology, specifically an eSourcing tool, is something that can enhance and increase your team's resiliency, making things better for not only your department, but also all the way down to citizens as well. So we're just going to take a quick pause here for one more quick poll question. So the question we'd like to pose is how you feel about the resiliency of your current procurement process. So the process that you currently have in place today, are you very confident about the resiliency, somewhat confident, not confident, or unsure because it's just something that you haven't even had the time to consider? So again, we'll give you just a little bit of time to answer that, and then we'll move ahead. All right, so taking a look here at the answers to the poll question, so 10% of you feel very confident in the resiliency, which is fantastic to hear. 67% are somewhat confident, so that's great to hear that there is confidence there, but there's, of course, always room for improvement, and we hope that we can assist a little bit with that today. And then 17% not confident. So again, hopefully there are some key takeaways from today that we can help you with. Lili, what are your thoughts on these responses? Are you surprised by these? Is this about what you would expect to see?
I'm actually really liking these responses. I think what this is a reflection of is the good people that you have on your procurement teams to be able to be resilient and respond to procurement requests. So perhaps you have the right people in place to be responsive. When I couple these results with the results in the previous poll of a mixed opportunity of having some manual and technology in place and somewhat manual processes, with this combined, what I can see here is again another opportunity. So we got the skill set of the people in place and some of the policies and procedures in place to respond appropriately, and maybe we can utilize some technology to help us in that aspect as well.
Fantastic. I think that's a great point of, what layering technology onto an already strong team can really do for a department and trickle all the way down through to citizens. Fantastic. And what we've seen on our end is that even some procurement teams that have implemented an e-sourcing platform still feel some level of unease because there are always risks. They're always omnipresent. There are certain things that you can't eliminate entirely. But using technology, you can reduce those risks or be able to respond to them faster and with more confidence. So one great example would be bid protests. You have all the information at your fingertips. It's easy to find. You can feel confident knowing that if a bid protest ever were to come in, you can easily find that information and respond. So we wanted to dive into a little bit more of a risks review. These are all risks that could crop up at any time. With such a large base of stakeholders to please, there are definitely always issues cropping up that you need to be able to deal with. So we'll run through these. You can see last-minute purchase requests. The administrative demands of a manual process can make it very difficult to react quickly to purchase requests that just seem to come out of left field. Again, we've talked a little bit about this today, the idea of low vendor participation. It can be very nerve-wracking to put up an RFP and not even know if you're going to have any vendors participate. And having a really easy-to-use digital process can definitely help with that. Also, the idea of sudden staff absences. You need to look at whether you're prepared in the event of unexpected staffing changes. Also, evaluator delays. I'm sure everyone's been in an evaluation meeting where you find that one individual or even a couple of individuals haven't had the time to finish scoring, and that can, of course, set your timeline back quite a bit sometimes. Bid protests, again, if you're needing to respond to a bid protest, it can be a drain on your time, and with the ever-present risk that missing documentation could actually jeopardize the decision that you and your team have made. There's also sudden spikes in procurement demands. So when your procurement process involves a lot of hands-on paperwork, an unexpected influx of purchase requests can definitely throw you off your game. Lili, are these common challenges that you've come across in the past, and how did you solve for them, and what impact did they have on your department?
Certainly, all of these risks identified are challenges that my team and myself have faced in the past, for sure. Some of them really speak out to me. So for low vendor participation, what we've then done is through the use of an e-sourcing tool, when we're posting our bids, we have the visibility of looking into how many vendors actually picked up our RFP, which gives us some insight into potential responses. A number of document pickups doesn't necessarily equate to the number of submissions, but it gives you an indicator. If there's too low of a pickup, that'll allow me some time to plan and be prepared for a low vendor submission. Or if I can see that there's a good substantive pickup, I can be quite confident that the number of submissions might be competitive. And we're all in a state where we do want competition, so that's something that was very helpful to us. Another area is evaluator delays. Previously a very taxing duty to us in sending out evaluator templates, let's say via email or through hand distribution to everyone, providing our working group members with a specified time frame and hoping that everyone will submit in time, of course, and then sending an occasional email reminder, not knowing where people are in their evaluations to say, just a reminder, it's due in a week, it's due in 5 days, it's due tomorrow. That takes time administratively to do that follow-up and that distribution. For us, with the use of technology, we now do our evaluations all online, and one of the greatest benefits there is to have visibility. We can actually see now who's actually even opened up the bid responses to start their evaluations. We can see how far they are in the process. We can then actually target who we really need to nudge and send some reminders of those that haven't perhaps not yet even started. So That's definitely been a huge help to us in our procurement process. And then finally, I look at bid protests. I recall one particular event in which, and for us, so I'm in Canada in the province of Ontario. Once you receive a formal bid protest, our entire evaluation or procurement process stops. And that's a big risk for us. That means a delay in your planned activities, which then can result in award, so far delays, and the actual execution of the project of what you're purchasing. So I recall a scenario in which we had a bid protest on a bid submission. My team is very small, and we don't have the luxury of having an administrative staff. So when we were receiving hard copy submissions to the mail, one, I had to always ensure that I had someone on my team available in the office to receive bids from vendors or from couriers. I had one particular case where I had a courier provider come in, and we had a manual timestamp there that would timestamp the bid and provide a receipt to confirm that they received it on time or late. And our timestamp said 2:01, and the courier's clock said 1:59, and we were there in a dispute, in an argument. And you know, that's a very uncomfortable situation to be in, and our hands are kind of bound at that point. There's nothing we can do. So with the use of technology, we now use an online submission portal. So vendors now can either submit online and through the click of a link, and that link is available up until 2 p.m. I'm using 2 p.m. as an example. Anytime after 2:01, that link in that portal disappears. There's no question anymore of whether or not you are on time or not. It is the worldwide web clock, and either you're in and you're not. So through the use of technology, it really has actually completely eliminated this risk of bid submissions on time. So certainly these risks resonate with me, and we have been able to leverage technology to help us mitigate or eliminate some of these challenges.
Fantastic. It sounds like it really added to the confidence as well that you can have in the process, knowing that you're not going to have to deal with things like that 1 minute delay and deal with those sorts of issues, along with all of the time savings as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on, we wanted to take a look at a couple of the main risks that municipalities may be facing. So we find that municipal procurement teams are facing what can be called a perfect storm of factors that influence your ability to maintain consistent staff resources. So we have some interesting stats here that we're sharing with you on the screen. You can see that 30 to 40% of state workers are actually currently eligible for retirement. 90% of municipalities do not have a succession plan in place for replacing employees and managers. And 53.8 days is the average length of the interview process for a government role. And then again, we've included this statistic that 51% of government procurement leaders do not believe that you have the capability on their team to deliver on the procurement strategy. So you can see that there are a number of factors at play here that mean that there are going to be a number of workers likely moving out of the workforce when you look at the percentage of individuals retiring. And then when you combine that with the fact that there's no succession plan in place for many municipalities, as well as the length of bringing someone else in, you can see that this is potentially going to be what could be a large issue for teams, especially those who are still in a manual process. So again, we're seeing this high proportion of retirement age staff. And actually by 2020, the number of baby boomers will exceed the number of children aged 5 and under in the United States. So there's this generation gap that means that veteran employees who have decades of just institutional knowledge will be leaving the workforce in record numbers. There's also often a difficulty in attracting and retaining talent. Procurement often faces stiff competition from the private sector in the talent struggle. And what can be a difficult or inflexible hiring process can definitely be an issue within the public sector. So as a result, it's actually quite common for senior level procurement staff to leave government roles for the private sector. So that introduces another layer of difficulty and risk. There's also this notion of chronic understaffing. Procurement teams are always being asked to do more with limited staff resources. And that often means that open positions are backfilled or go unfilled which leaves the remaining staff to divide responsibilities and make do with what they have. And really, given the compounding pressures, staff turnover and retirement, you really have the potential to pose a major challenge for just the day-to-day function of procurement teams. Your ability to uphold your mandate even during times of transition really depends on preparation and robust, resilient processes. Lili, in terms of staffing and personnel, is this something that you've dealt with or have stories of from the past?
Absolutely. From time to time, I certainly have faced these types of staffing challenges. What has helped us is through the use of technology. We have in place a system that tracks individuals' procurements, active procurements. And so what that provides for me is visibility into what people are working on and how far in the RFP process or RFX process they're into. That for me is important when I have an unexpected or when assigning work, just so that I can have a better understanding of what people's current workloads are. I would say prior to having the system in place, it was a lot of one-on-ones with me and the team to understand what they're working on. So having it centralized in a dashboard type report allows me that ease and access on a quick turnaround time to see who's working on what and what I can do to respond. The other thing that's helped myself and the team, particularly for unexpected leave of absences or vacation coverage, our systems now provide a centralization of documentation, and we've then standardized our processes for that. So when we're cross-covering, folks have access to each other's records in a centralized forum. And we've also then added the loop of standardizing what that looks like, so that when someone's going into someone's folder, that folder looks consistent. So for example, and this is one thing that I'm going to speak to that doesn't actually require use of a system, but just standardizing your folders. So we've, instead of having one particular procurement folder for an RFP, we've then divided each procurement folder into 5 subfolders, which would then relate to auditable documents or retention. So each folder is broken out into a stage of an RFP process, starting from initiation to development of the RFX, to posting, to bid receipts, to evaluations, and then final to contract award. So having those standardized folders, everyone then knows where to save all of your documents that are relevant to those stages. So when you're covering for someone and you're looking for a particular document, or when you're performing an audit, you know exactly where to go, rather than having it in a dumper versus everyone saving it in their own mechanism or their own naming convention. So that's something that has helped us in terms of alleviating some of the challenges in response to staffing. Another thing that also I found has worked for me when I'm in an interview process and I'm hiring a contract specialist. Folks often do ask me what sourcing tools or what e-sourcing tools do you currently utilize. And I find that in response to that, having being able to say that, yeah, we're using technology and these are the tools that we're using, are you familiar with them? It actually becomes very attractive for me as an organization to procurement professionals, and knowing that our organization has these systems in place and that we've made those investments to help our staff.
Yeah, we definitely hear that a lot as well from the market, that talent is asking what systems are being used. They want to know that wherever it is that they're going to be working does have some technology in place to assist them. So I think that's a great point. As well as the point just about the folders, that that's something that's easy to implement, and it's really a great example of what people listening today, without even implementing anything new, could begin to do within their own team just to create less risk in the process. Fantastic. So if you are looking to implement technology, we wanted to run through, and we've touched on some of these points, but just go through a little bit more about the difference that technology could make in your process. So there's this idea, Lili, I believe you just touched on this actually, of there's one centralized place and platform for all bid and RFP information. So you can manage all bid and RFP decisions across all of your procurement staff in one place. So as you mentioned, in the event of an absence, team members can actually grant access to a colleague, and then they would receive immediate visibility to vendor details, proposal documents, evaluator information, scoring, as well as all project communication. Also providing consistency and standardization in the procurement process. Streamlining the procurement process online allows managers to operationalize best practices across the entire team. Templates and drafts can be used to ensure that standard clauses and compliance language are always included. And it also provides the opportunity for new staff to access all past projects in order to learn from previous examples. There's also clear visibility into project progress. So eSourcing platforms capture all of the steps in the bid and RFP process, including the evaluation. So teams can monitor progress and projects through dashboards from high level as well as granular. So you can, as Lili mentioned, actually go in and see where people are in the evaluation process. And you can actually take a look at scoring prior to having an evaluation meeting. So you can see if there's a large gap between two evaluators and address that prior to the meeting. Also, time-saving automations. Automation is an important part of the solution when it comes to the staffing challenges that we just discussed, because it allows teams that might be small or overstretched to really expand your capacity. So you can cross many of the tedious, repetitive tasks off of the to-do list and then move into being more strategic, which I think probably everyone on this call today would enjoy, being able to be a little bit more strategic in your day-to-day. And having really simple, easy to use evaluation tools. So when multiple team members are working from the same Excel sheet, and we mentioned this previously again, something as simple as one accidental keystroke or a tab that's not visible could really create very large errors that throw off the entire process. And having complete online records. So you're obviously facing high public scrutiny. Having complete records of your bid and RFP decisions is very imperative. So this way you have online a repository of every part of the process so that if there is a bid protest, if there are questions, you always have that repository of information. So let's take another look at a different issue that's impacting many municipal procurement teams, which is the idea of last-minute requests. So here you can see what the typical length of the RFP normally is. So typical is a duration of 56 days with 7 requested documents and data fields, 9.6 criteria, 3 evaluation stages, and typically about 4 or 5 evaluators per project. So it's extremely important when you're working with your internal customers, as I'm sure you know, to be able to provide accurate time estimates when it comes to fulfilling their request, which obviously can be difficult if it's a last-minute request and you're not sure if you're able to turn that around in time. It can create distrust between departments and can really be a major point of contention among teams. Lili, what's been your experience in your role when it comes to last-minute requests?
Last-minute requests are all too common for me, and you know, we've been quite fortunate in having the resources and tools and technology in place in order to respond. But when I think of last-minute requests, I think of you know, one thing we want is to ensure that we have enough time in place to be able to, one, address and respond to the requests, but the time in place to really add that procurement value into the process. So I don't want to spend my time in figuring out or, you know, catching people during the evaluation stages. I don't want to spend the time necessarily in the areas of having people in place from an administrative perspective and tabulating results or collecting the bids. What I want my team to focus on is the time in the value add in procurement. So, for example, during the negotiation process, I don't want to cut the time in that particular stage because I need to respond quickly and get the award in by a certain time. So, I think that when it comes to my experience for last-minute requests, We've certainly been able to leverage technology to sort of give us some peace of mind and take care of those administrative areas that we were able to use technology for, and have that opportunity to put it into the areas of true value add when it comes to procurement.
That's a great point about value add, and going back to this idea of being more strategic in sourcing. So when you can kind of automate a bit of the process, then you can move from being just purely tactical and trying to knock things off to really just adding more strategy into it. It means more time for research, as you said, more time to negotiate, and less time that's spent on reporting. And what we've also heard from the market is that there's, confidence, which is always great in teams to feel that they're confident and able to turn these projects around and really make a difference. And teams have also said that they find with more time, they're able to provide more value internally. So again, that's better research, negotiation, and we find it really helps teams to be more confident in their decisions. And moving on, there's not just an impact when you're looking at bringing technology into your department. It's not just positive impacts on your team and your department. There are also impacts to take into account on stakeholders, evaluators, and vendors. So you can see here, this is from an internal report that we created. You can see the high number of vendors that typically leave their submission until quite late in the process. So again, that means that if you have a submission process that's very difficult to follow and very time consuming, you might miss out on bids because vendors might be late. And there's also, as Lili mentioned, that possibility for bid disputes as well. And looking here at evaluators. So there is a large impact on evaluators. As we can see from this data, evaluators are also leaving their scoring until later in the time that they're allotted. If they're rushing through what's a very complex or arduous process, they may not score appropriately, so the wrong vendor may ultimately be chosen, and this could obviously have some severe negative impacts on the citizens of your municipality. We also do see from research a large number of scoring that's happening outside of work hours. So using technology that is easy for them to, log in, log out, if they're logging on in between meetings or at home after dinner, a process that's really easy for them to just simply log in and out. They can get more done rather than lugging around the actual, paper binders, things of that nature. So we find that technology is really helping them to fit the process into when they would typically be doing their scoring and evaluation. Lili, when you implemented some technology, what have you seen from vendors and evaluators, and what has been the feedback that you've received from them?
Actually, the most positive response as a result of us implementing eSourcing tools has been from our evaluators, our stakeholders. Our evaluators here work for a hospital, so they are clinicians, they're program leads, and they're subject matter experts. And the response was so great that they actually no longer want to participate in a procurement unless it's evaluated online. So change management was very mindful for us when we started to roll out an e-sourcing tool, an online evaluation tool to our evaluators. In our initial rollout, we actually invested in iPads to distribute to evaluators, thinking that that would help them in the transition from paper or Excel-based to online. And we quickly learned that it wasn't necessary. A lot of them didn't take the use of the iPads. They were very happy to work on their own laptops or work from their desks. And looking at these results in which evaluators, it looks like they're responding off hours, that's not a surprise to me. Something, that we're mindful of is that our evaluators, these guys have their own day jobs. They are subject matter experts, and their expertise are pulled in through the procurement project, which is largely a project for them. And so for us to provide them the flexibility to perform their evaluations at their own leisure, or at their own time, I would say leisure, it provides them, I find that they're more apt in working with us as a result. So the response from our evaluators has been great. Correspondingly, actually results to our vendors. So in our first 2 years of implementing an online e-submission portal, for vendors. One of our standard debriefing questions to the vendor community was to ask for some feedback into this new way of submitting bids. And the reviews were very positive. Surprisingly actually, we were very happy to hear that people really liked that things were available now easily online. They found that the support provided from the online e-tool was also very responsive, which was important to us too. So the vendor community response has been very good in response to us implementing new e-sourcing tools. And I would, just taking a step back, when we're thinking about implementing new tools, it is important to bear in mind all of your stakeholders, so not just the impact directly to your procurement team, but also to everyone else within the process, which includes our evaluators and the vendor community as well.
Definitely, yeah, you really want to make sure that it's something that's going to be a positive for everyone involved, because obviously vendors and evaluators are so much a part of the process. And it's really interesting. It seems like moving a little bit more towards the digital process possibly fits in with more of the lifestyle of the evaluators and when it is that they need to be doing their scoring. So as we mentioned at the beginning, purchasing technology is always something that obviously is not always easy to implement into a municipality. So really, when you're making a business case for procurement technology, there are a lot of things to bear in mind. And we've heard that this can be a really large challenge, just getting the go-ahead to implement technology. So Lili, you touched a little bit earlier on the business case that you created. So what are the very key things that you believe need to be included in any business case that anyone's looking to make?
Where I would start in terms of a business case is putting a lot of focus and emphasis on current state assessment. Really be honest and dig in here as to where are some key areas of improvement in your current processes that you could really see happening. Risks that are impacting you today. If you've ever been audited, what were some of the findings of those audits? What are some of the pain points that are facing you today? What some of the feedback has been? Sometimes a lot of the feedback you actually hear are from your evaluators and are from your vendors, indicating that something in our process can be improved, but sorry, today with our current process, we don't have that opportunity. So listing almost like a laundry list of what are your pain points today, and then looking at what would be your desired future state. So if all of these problems are fixed, this is what our future system would look like. And then how do you get there? Can you actually leverage technology to get there? Maybe technology is not the solution to getting there. Maybe it's actually a change to a certain process or policy that you have in place that can mitigate or hinder the risk identified. You may also need to consider phase your approach. It could be a lot, especially if you're going completely manual to technology. Maybe you want to phase certain parts of the procurement process rather than moving it all at once. So in today's world, there's a plethora of technology available. You can find e-sourcing solutions that map out different stages of the procurement process. So you can also find one that does a full end-to-end available online as well. The other thing another tip that I would give out is, I know funding can be a limitation for a lot of people. So be a little creative. For example, for us, what we did was, as a result of knowing that we now provided the vendor community an online e-submission portal, we realized that a benefit to the vendor community would be some savings in time and money. So, for example, instead of having to print high-quality, multiple copies of submission, collating, binding, reviewing, courier costs in getting them through, and then even things like, sometimes you do your final print in color and you read through and you find a mistake. Oh, you got to reprint the whole package again because it might go over a few pages. We realize that comes at a cost to a vendor, and by submitting online now, they've now saved that cost. So as part of my business case, to me to pay for some of the solutions that I want to implement, I also then adopted, I put in place a little revenue stream. So for a vendor now to pick up an RFP from us, I charge them, and that revenue then helps to offset my cost of the actual eSourcing tool. So be creative in some aspects. So when I'm asking my organization for money, I put in place an idea of I'll fund this portion, I need you to invest the other half, and that'll help you in your business case as well.
That's a great point, that just adding in that creativity and looking at ways that you can offset the cost. I think that's a really great point that people might not always realize to include, and I think that would probably always help to further the business case a bit. So that's fantastic. So we have covered a lot today. We really hope that we've added to your understanding of how to build the most resilient procurement process possible. And we hope that you've enjoyed working through some of those challenges that procurement teams might be facing. So what we'll do now is we have about 10 minutes or so left. We'll turn it over to some questions and see if there's anything specific you were wondering about or wanted to know more about.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. This is Bill again. If possible, go ahead and put your specific questions in. We have several questions in front of us, and we also have time. And know that if for any reason that your question isn't answered, the speakers will answer you personally. So go ahead and put your questions in, make it as specific as you want, and we'll toss them out there to Amanda and Lili for the answers. So let's start with the first question to get the ball rolling. And if you don't mind, Amanda, I'll start with you and then defer to Lili for additional response here. So the first question is, when in your current state analysis do you determine that you cannot progress any further without technology procurement software?
So Lili, you may have a better look at this having built that business case. So I'll let you take this one.
Sure. I think so. The question is, where in my current state do I think there's a process that can't be better with technology? Well, if you find that your current processes are robust and resilient enough that there's no opportunity for technology, then sure, then the use of technology won't help. But what I would challenge you is maybe researching what technology is available and out there. That may actually, there might be some things that are out there that we're unaware of that could be useful to you in your current process. And you know, procurement is a wide end-to-end process. There's multiple stages within your procurement process. So maybe a particular stage in your procurement process is already optimized. And that can be an area that doesn't need to be improved at this time. But let's look at the full end-to-end process, and then ask your team, what are some pain points and challenges? What are they spending a lot of their time on that that they don't quite enjoy doing? That could be automated to their benefit. So that would be my response to that question.
Good deal. All right, then another question here, and again, Amanda, let me just start with you and say the next question, read this out, I'm sorry, is when charging a vendor to pick up an RFP, do you charge per page or set a fee? Any thoughts on that?
In our case, I do not charge per page. I charge per procurement. And one thing that we did do before actually implementing this was I did a market scan. So I looked at to see who's currently charging the vendor community to pick this up. So this was not new. It was still the idea from another public entity. And then I scanned, okay, well, how much is everyone charging? And there was a wide range. And what I then decided was to charge a midpoint that I thought was reasonable at the time. So I was on the low end, I wasn't on the far end. And we don't charge for things that do not result in a submission. So for example, if I'm posting an RFI, a request for information, I'm not charging for that. I'm not expecting a submission that will result in them winning the opportunity. It's just information. If I'm posting an ACAN, Advance for Contract Award Notification, I'm also not charging that for that particular package. I'm only charging for procurement opportunities that will potentially results in the vendor winning the business.
Very good. The next question here, and again, keep the questions coming in. We have a few more minutes, so feel free to ask your very specific questions here about your operation. Will be just fine. Okay, so the next question, and either one of you, Lili or Amanda, let's see. How do I know if my team, stakeholders, and vendors are ready for procurement software? That's a good one.
Mm. So I'll speak to that first.
Okay.
One thing to bear in mind is what motivates your team, I think. You certainly do a good scan of your team and how apt they are to change. I'll say I have a range. I have some folks that are very comfortable in the current process, and then I have some folks that are really up for new challenges and very open to changes. The way to sell this to your team is to show them the benefit. People will not, this is all party management, people will not be conducive to new processes and technology if they don't see what's in it for them. So it's important to let them see how the implementation of what you're decided to put in will benefit them. And that's not just to your team, but that's also to your evaluators and to your vendor community. So I think during this webinar we highlighted some of those benefits. So to a vendor, now it's online. They've saved some money from not having to print their submissions in there. From my evaluator point of view, they then have the flexibility now to do their scores online instead of then and there in Excel sheets and sending it back, and they have the flexibility of logging in whenever they'd like. The greatest benefit, personally, is actually to my procurement team: greater visibility, greater insight, ability to cross-coverage, centralization of documents. That definitely is there. You need a champion. You need someone to lead the change and to be able to effectively communicate the benefits to your stakeholders in order to adopt and increase that. And, when I'm at conferences and I'm speaking to the vendor community, I've been finding that the response has actually been quite positive. Most vendors nowadays, they're looking for us to provide that ease of submission, that ease of access to bid opportunities from the organization. So I personally think the vendor community is ready.
Yeah, I definitely think clear communication of also what to expect is very important as well, so that your team understands what is coming down to them, because I think there's always that, fear of change. But if there's clear communication of what they can expect, we've always found that helps as a lot as well.
Very good. And as a follow-up to that question, how important do either of you find, and particularly Lili in your operation, the training and as in onboarding new people? Is the training a particularly important element to this process?
Training is absolutely important, but I would actually take a step back. Find a tool that's very user-friendly and easy to use and intuitive that will benefit you and support you in your training of onboarding of new staff. So I've been quite fortunate enough that the systems that we've chosen, they're very user-friendly and easy to use. They have direct access to support at any time. They have manuals available online. So my investment in onboarding for training has been quite minimal myself.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
And I think that's always a very important point to look at when you're choosing, as Lili said, when you're choosing software. It's very important to have a really good understanding of what that support and implementation is like. That's one of the key elements as well.
Absolutely. Certainly been our experience on government procurement in American City and County. So the next question here, and we still have a little time for a few more here. This is what is the implementation process like? So describe it. Either one of you would be good, or both.
So Lili, if you wanted to speak from, yeah.
Yes, I'll start with this one. So the implementation process. Okay, so here's what I would suggest you do. Once you've done your market research and you've landed on a tool that you'd like to implement, the first thing that I would recommend you do is to pilot it. So pilot it using either a fictitious or real. I would actually recommend using a real procurement, and have a champion on your procurement team that will use the tool to pilot it. So during that pilot phase, you become aware that you build in a little bit more time into your process because you are piloting it. and you inform your stakeholders in advance that you're using this new system and you're piloting this, and we're going to learn, just to manage expectations that this is new, and we're going to learn from doing this at the beginning. So when you are implementing, choose a project to pilot, find a champion in your group to lead that pilot and that implementation, and then take any lessons learned from that you might need to then build into your process to implement to the wider and broader community. A lot of this, again, part of implementation is all about communication, managing expectations, and being able to provide support when required, because you will get those, okay, well, how do I do this, how do I do that? Surprisingly enough, and again, it's all about choosing the right tool. The greatest thing is that I've been so fortunate enough to choose some of the tools that the first line of response doesn't come to me in the procurement team. First line of response and how to log in, create an ID, use this, goes to the software. And they are helping my end users and my stakeholders and the vendors respond to their inquiries. And I'm going to tell you that that's very key, because that takes off the time for me and my team to make those responses.
Excellent. All right, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Got time for a couple of more here. Are you using these bid portals for invitations to bid for construction?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Is there any advice or anything, any proclivities you think anyone should address when using the portal for construction specifically?
So sometimes for construction, so in some, I've been finding in some municipalities, in some regions, some people still require like public opening of bids. So if you're still bound to that that old way of doing things, you won't be able to use an online submission portal. But in Ontario, we can now accept online, and we do. What you may find helpful is that our online submission portal tool is not one drop file of like 100 pages. You have the ability to segregate. I would like, for example, you can segregate your proposal submission to steer your vendors to ensure that they're uploading the correct file into the correct docket. So, I mean, an easy example would be you want price separated in a separate envelope. So during when you're building that submission, you create one folder for the proposal in itself, and you create another folder for the price. When it comes to construction, there's lots of aspects of what to submit in there. So break it out into sub-portals, sub-files, I would say, not sub-portals, and that will help the vendor community in knowing which link to submit which document, and it then also helps your evaluators to focus on, because you'll have different subject matter experts for different portions of the project, and they can then focus on reviewing only those that are relevant to them as well, instead of looking at the entire package.
Excellent. All right, and one question or two more here. Can you share the vendor being used, named it, I assume?
You mean which technology am I using for eSourcing? Is that the question?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
So I can share that. I'm actually using a number of different systems right now for different areas of my procurement process, specifically because we've been focused on speaking to evaluations and online e-submissions. We are using Bonfire. For posting bid opportunities, I use Bid and Go. For contract management, I use a different a cloud-based software tool called Cobblestone.
Gotcha. Okay, and I'm afraid we really are at the top, so just one more question here. Let's see. How do you manage your projects? Do you use, is it Gantt charts?
This one's a good question. So when I was researching project management tools available in the market, there's a ton of software for general project management, but I wanted one that was very specific to procurement. I wanted one that I could customize and build to the different stages in the procurement process. I wanted one that could also track the soft and hard savings that were results of the procurement. So what we did, instead of purchasing one online, I built my own. I used SharePoint as my base, and I built my own reporting tool through the use of SharePoint. I hired a
Excellent.
third-party technical expert to help me build it.
Good advice, both. Well, listen, we have reached the top of the hour, and speaking of excellent, I'd like to thank Amanda and Lili for their excellent presentations. We'd also like to thank the sponsor, Bonfire, for making today's webinar possible. Know that if we didn't answer your question, the speakers will respond to you personally. As a reminder, you're going to receive a follow-up email that includes a link to view the recording of today's presentation. So if you found this event useful, please share it with your colleagues. At the end of the event, which is seconds away, a short survey will pop up in your browser window. We'd appreciate it if you would share this feedback on this event, as it helps provide you and as well as the sponsor with content that's the most valuable and interesting to you. Finally, all of us here would like to thank you for your time. This is Bill Volpin, and we look forward to seeing you at the next American City and County webinar.